All right, I think that we started the show. Let me play our beautiful intro.
Yes.
Hi, guys, and welcome to the Gin and Tonic Show. We help Muslims and non Muslims to handle Islam in the 21st century. My name is Mustafa, and this is my co host in the nick of time. If you wish to talk about Islam, the ideology, you have come to the right place. We cover current Islamic news, Islamic scripture, some crazy comments, and a weekly topic about Islam to examine, critique, and analyze. If this is not enough Islam for you, please drop by our Discord to discuss any further questions about Islam. We condemn any form of discrimination, violence, misogyny, slavery. However, we do embrace free speech and criticism if it's factual and correct. Thank you for stopping by and enjoy the Gin and Tonic Show.
Hello.
Evening, everybody. Welcome to I know it's whoever's watching this live, that is. Good evening. Welcome to the Gin and Tonic Show. I know we're starting early. I should have put that announcement, but you can watch this later too. But yeah, I just have some some events to go to. So we're going to do this show slightly early, like half an hour early. So how are you guys today? How are you, Nikhil?
I'm doing well. Lots of work in the weekend that I gotta get through for the day.
And now
And
yeah.
yeah, and I was just saying, but I'm excited for this episode because I improved on my last notes.
It's good research that you did. You did pretty good research, and I'll share the screen and show it to everybody. And these are some interesting topics that we're going to talk about. Then we have Zain Sami from the Bloodline. How are you doing today, Zain Sami?
I'm doing good. It's good to be here, and it's an interesting topic. I believe it's Nikhil's choice. Yeah, is it your choice?
Yeah. I mainly did the research, but then like reading it live, my dyslexia kind of acts up. So
Yeah, and I do find it interesting, especially because all of these civilizations, they are quite an important part of human history, and they really had an effect on how we basically live our lives today. So yeah, a good topic, and I'm looking forward to this one.
And welcome to the show. Very cultured, very well mannered, extremely neutral, cultured, very morally gray, cultured Ginny.
Thank you for hosting me.
By the way, guys, Culture Ginny did a very excellent two past videos as well. One of my favorites is about he talks about the infanticide in Mecca. That is the infanticide of girls, and he addressed my question whether it was a form of ritual sacrifice. So he addresses that question. So I really give him props for that video. Do check it out. He has done some amazing work, and he actually looks at the sources. That is. So please definitely check out Ginny's channel. So before we begin to today's topic, I'll cover some news items. Right now, we have the occupied West Bank, which is one of the regions of occupied Palestinian territories, is currently like facing a what do you call it? A crisis. That is, like we have Israeli forces killing certain Palestinian men. There was a raid in the Jenin refugee camp. That is, and also like you have 9 Palestinians getting killed, and then you have like Blinken from the U.S. He's got reaffirming the ironclad support. Again, I'm not going to. UN agency seeks for Palestinian refugees seeks $1.6 billion in funding because again, we're getting a lot more refugees from the West Bank. That is because again, initially it was the Gaza region. In the future video, we will definitely cover Palestine and Israel's conflict, that is, in future installments of Gin and Tonic. But I know we just wanted to cover certain topics. And then Zain and Sami and myself, we were talking about Pakistani news, that is, how there was an explosion in Peshawar. There was the mosque explosion. And Zain, Sami, it was just a tragic incident. There was the explosion in the mosque, and there was a lot of blame on like who's responsible for this. But Zain Sami also addressed there was an issue with the aid that was going through to the flood victims of Pakistan as well. Zain, do you have more details on the report?
Yeah, about the blast, I do believe that the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan accepted responsibility for it.
Oh,
And
really?
the way, yeah, and the way they did it is they actually sent a person in a police's garb, and he was able to get through security very easily. And once the blast happened, I think about 50 people lost their lives on the spot, and then 50 others lost their lives in hospital. So the death toll is more than 100 now.
Wow.
And
Okay.
and later on, the Pakistani army and government they made a statement against the Taliban, saying that, well, you took people's lives and you did it in this, disgusting manner.
Hmm.
And the Taliban responded by saying that don't blame us for how dumb you are, because you literally let us through, by just not, you let us through your security. You were just so dumb that we were able to send a person in, a policeman's dress, and he got through your security. So don't blame us for how dumb you are. So that's
Yeah,
how they
yeah.
responded. And
I would say
well,
like I gotta hand it to Pakistan for not pulling in India and blaming it on us.
Yeah, at least they didn't blame it on India this time.
yeah, well,
Um,
that's only because the perpetrators actually accepted responsibility this time. So who would have blamed them?
Oh no, no, no. Yeah, the Taliban's probably gonna be like, I did it, I did it. In Pakistan, Imran Khan's like, no, 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 it's India. It's
well, keep in
Modi.
mind, Imran Khan is
Yeah,
no longer prime minister, right?
Yeah,
Currently, the prime minister is Shehbaz Sharif, the younger brother of Nawaz Sharif,
yeah,
and he also has a lot of corruption charges. He
yeah,
plays up to the religious nonsense too. So,
yeah.
yeah, he
I'd be
But
basically,
shocked if
remember,
he didn't.
yeah,
remember, at the moment, he is the army's puppet. So
yeah,
that's the main thing that he is, right. And
Yeah,
honestly, since he's been in power, a lot of the cases on him have actually been removed. Quietly, they've actually freed him of a lot of charges because he's doing the army's bidding at the moment. So,
interesting.
yeah, when you do that, it really works well for you. So that's what he's doing. He's playing into the hands of the establishment at the moment.
Wow,
Yeah.
wow.
And
So,
the other thing I was saying is the stuff about the floods. The floods happened, I believe, 3 or 4 months ago. Or was it about 6 months ago? Uh, I
uh-huh.
think it. I think it was July or something. Yeah, the summer.
Mhm. Yeah,
A lot of people sent aid in, from in the country, and overseas Pakistanis and others. A lot
yeah,
of people really sent out of the goodness of their heart. They sent a lot of money and a lot of aid, a lot of food, a lot of clothes. Yeah, Sheikh Hasina was one of those people, the Prime Minister of Bangladesh.
really.
Uh, yeah, and so many others. But I got the news recently that some people who are in charge of taking that aid to, the flood affectees, they sold about half of the aid that they had, the
Yeah.
food and the clothes and the items that were supposed to go to the affectees. They sold them for money. So,
Wow,
things like
wow,
that are going on as well.
wow,
In times like these, even people just don't, they just don't quit. The way that they make their money, and all of their corruption and all of this dog shit, they just can't quit it. They just can't
wow,
stop doing it.
wow. It's pretty messed up that,
Yeah,
even during the flood season, the so-called like
yeah,
the
yeah,
what do you call it, Pakistani uh, people, like a lot of
yeah,
people would take advantage of like the weak at
yeah,
this situation, and then there's aid coming from the devil himself, the United States and Russia
yeah.
and all these places, and then oh no, America's
Yeah,
evil, blah blah blah. It's like, yeah, you're
yeah.
taking
And
this.
the good Muslims, well,
Yeah,
because it's from the devil, they go ahead and they sell it.
yeah,
They, ma-
yeah,
they make sure it goes to good use.
yeah. This is the same shit that happened when Tamil Nadu had its tsunami, right?
yes,
Yeah,
There were a bunch of rich people who bought land near Chennai, and we're like, oh
yeah,
my god, might look at my address, it's in Chennai, and like these were all people that were like trying to bribe the embassy to get their visas, And now,
Yeah.
oh my God, magically I got land in Chennai now, and they were able to get refugee status when
Yeah.
the people that were able to that were still stuck there, highly qualified people,
Yeah.
could not actually leave.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. The fact
Yeah.
that that shit happens, it's very disappointing.
Yeah. Honestly, when you see, things like these, it makes you feel, ashamed to be a human at times.
Yeah.
Like, how can people be so low?
Yeah. And if anything, I work in refugee law as well too,
Yeah.
and we have had some cases of like it's complete garbage that what they're coming up with, but there are definitely some genuine cases, especially from places like Palestine, from
Yeah.
places like Syria, Yemen,
Yeah.
we and Libya as well. Libya, and then there have been some fraudulent Pakistani cases. Again, I know they claim to be Ahmadi or Shia Muslim, and then actually they're not even either. So they've come up with a system in Canada that we've come
Yeah.
up with, at least like invite a cleric, like a Shia or an Ahmadi cleric,
Yeah.
confirm if they're even Ahmadi or Shia Muslim to begin with, to at least confirm, okay, are they really that? Because we have been getting some Sunni Muslims pretending to be Shia Muslims claiming refugee status in Canada.
I have a question
Yeah.
Yeah.
regarding this.
Yeah. Go on.
It's mainly 12er
A
Shia
good
you
friend of
have
mine.
in Pakistan, right?
Yeah, mainly 12er Shia, yes. Mainly 12er. There is a small minority of Ismaili, what do you call it, Pakistanis as well, like a very small number. But most of them have already moved to Canada. As I think they did claim refugee status during the 80s, the 70s, and the 80s. So,
If you're interested on this topic, Moose, I think Puya would also be someone that would be knowledgeable on this,
oh,
considering he took
definitely.
himself.
Definitely, Puya would definitely know something about this. But anyway, today our topic is we're covering a lot of things. We're covering like the religion of Rome, the rise of Christianity. It does tie into the rise of Islam too, and kind of like the downfall of the Roman Empire, that is. And we're kind of like skimming over the timelines too. So every paragraph and the way Nikhil organized this is very convenient. It's not uber detailed.
Like last week, I apologize. I still apologize for that. I apologize and I don't apologize because I'm proud of my research.
Oh
But I
yeah,
also
but
know,
it was just a lot of, like, I think for a show, it was a lot of what do you call it, information. But
yeah, as a neutral, before we move forward, Zane, Sammy, what did you think of like the last two episodes as like a neutral audience member?
You did really well. I mean, the information was very detailed, that's for sure. And Moose was, basically hosting the shows. I think you hosted one, Nikhil, and then Moose hosted the next one.
Yeah.
I didn't really participate in the show. I mean, I think I just did one commercial one time. And I just did a bit of comments the second time.
yeah.
I was just listening because I wasn't really aware of those topics. But I had to. I said it before, and I'll say it again. I was really impressed with the way that the information was really organized, really detailed, and the way that you just kept talking and talking for 2 hours.
Oh,
I know
dear.
from
I needed
experience that-
water. I needed water at that time. At the end.
Yeah, but really, I know that talking for 2 hours straight, that's hard work. Not
Yeah,
everybody can do it.
I wish one of you guys was here, at least someone to bounce off of. That is, but definitely, I'm glad all three are here too, so we can bounce off of this interesting topic. So, Nikhil, first, you start off with the religion in ancient Rome, right? So,
Yeah. So you might want to zoom into it a bit.
okay, let me just zoom in a bit. Okay, so
That's perfect.
see, it says here, religion in ancient Rome combines several different cult practices and embraced more than a single set of beliefs. There was the rural animistic tradition, which many spirits or gods were responsible for something specific. There's the limited aspects of the cosmos. And then the early Romans referred to these gods as numina. So what's the term that numina, you mentioned this, it means for plowing, for horses and for cattle. That's an interesting term that they used.
It's almost
They
It's
also
almost like Hinduism. Yeah.
they also use the term genius for spirit, or Jenny in plural.
Jenny, or now it sounds like Ginny.
Yeah, there is actually some debate if genie comes from that word, but
Interesting.
I actually think that it's just a very very strong coincidence, or very lucky or funny coincidence. But because due to other reasons, because this word that jinn comes from
Hmm.
in existed other Semitic languages, and some that were in use even before Roman times.
I think even certain like Hebrew texts you can find this word too.
Yeah,
And also, I found some Talmudic sources talking about jinni as recognized creatures. So there was some influence from the Hebrews. And
yeah. No. I meant that the word jinn isn't actually related to what was called a genus in Rome. Or do there are actually some theories that are probably a lot more closer, that the term genius might actually have been a Phoenician borrowing into
mm,
Latin.
because this is similar to Iblis, which seems to have been borrowed from the word diablos, from Greek, diablos, and then Iblis became the Arabic term for Satan. So,
Yes,
which I found something that was interesting. Um,
but
yeah,
the but yeah, they believed in the spirit, very much local spirits, Jenny,
very
that
local
could
spirit,
influence things.
and
And they
it's
also had this idea, not just local spirits, but they also had strong ideas about these spirits being reincarnated or incarnated into you, especially family spirits. And
interesting.
thus, the Romans had these ideas about castus, which means purity, in that you had to keep yourself ritually pure, you had to avoid certain people, you had to do certain acts to keep you pure, including bathing and the like. You had
Uh-huh.
to, do certain acts that was in accordance with the genus familia, the family spirit, because you wanted to incarnate this family spirit to make it reincarnate into you
Hmm.
through the generations. And by doing that was by keeping yourself clean and doing what was your supposed role in society. This was very much the case in early Roman society. Though this weakened, a lot of these rules weakened, so you could in later Roman society actually do a lot more, interaction with people that weren't of your
And
background.
also, Moose, just as a comparison, I'd say like imagine early Hinduism where every village had its own like deity
Hmm.
almost.
Yes, that's
Okay.
very close to it. I mean, both the Roman pantheon
Yeah.
and the Hindu gods descend originally from, some sort of united Indo-European mythology, according
Hmm.
to certain
Certain
experts
historians.
within
Yeah.
historians and the historians of religion.
Yeah. There are many similarities with the mythologies too, with the myths being very, and even some of them, some remnants of the Greek mythology are found in ancient Pakistan, where uh, Kanishka the Great was ruling in the fourth and the sixth centuries. And
You also have Deus Pater and the name
mm,
Deus Pater being, descended down into some sort of, I think it's Deus or
yeah, yeah,
something in Hindu mythology, and it goes down into in the Germanic mythology as Tyr,
yeah,
Deus Pater Tyr, and in in
because
the Roman tradition Jupiter,
yeah,
and
yeah,
in Greek Zeus
yeah, and
from
even
Deus.
even Hercules or Heracles, he was worshipped in Pakistan too as Irakilo. That is, so he was so there was the cult of Hercules that existed.
Yeah,
And
because
yeah,
of Alexander the Great and his campaign. Yes.
Mhm. Yes, because he was a huge fan of Hercules himself too. Um, then it says here the Etruscans, or I'm probably butchering this, provided context out of which the Roman culture and religious beliefs evolved. See Etruscan mythology.
Etruscan.
Etruscan. Another aspect of this animistic. So, is this the original, where it evolves from Etruscan mythology?
No, Etruscan mythology isn't Indo-European per
Right.
se, but they did have a lot of that we do think. But the problem is that Etruscan is a language isolate, which means that
Right.
we haven't cracked the code because it seems to be unrelated to any other language we know.
Yeah.
Which means that we don't know what they did, and so we just have secondary sources from other. We have a lot of Etruscan texts because we knew that they were literate,
Yeah.
and we knew that this must be sort of text, but we can't read them, we can't understand them.
Yeah. Because there was this belief in ancestor worship, with each family honoring their own dead by their own rights, and which
Yeah, that's what's shared by the Romans.
Mhm. And in early Roman history of the Republic, foreign goods were being imported, especially from Greece.
Gods, yeah,
Oh,
gods.
foreign gods. Oh, sorry. Yeah, foreign gods. They, especially with the Greeks, they had a lot of Minoan and Mycenaean gods that actually descended into the Greek kingdoms,
Yeah.
and then they evolved into the Roman pantheon. So, which had a greater cultural influence on the Romans, and the Romans connected some of their indigenous deities with Greek gods and goddesses.
Yeah, they compare them to each other, but it's
Yeah.
I would still say that their religious worldviews were actually quite distinct. I haven't made the video yet, but I have recorded the thing for a video when I talk
Yeah.
about this fact that the Greek gods and the Roman gods were not the same thing. They were actually quite distinct.
Yeah, and what do you call it? I would look forward to that video, especially like knowing the differences, and also like Nikhil says here, as the Roman Empire expanded and included people from a variety of cultures, there were more and more gods. So the legions, they brought home cults originating from Egypt, Britain, at that time known as Britannia, Iberia, Germany known as Germania, India, and Persia. Well, technically it's called Iran Shahar, but it's the Persian because how the Romans and the Greeks used to use the capital as the name of the place, but generally it was called Iran or Iran Shahar. The cults of Sibyl, Isis, not the terrorist group, we're talking the goddess, and Mithras were particularly important. Along with this, the ancient Romans' beliefs and practices continued, especially in and around Rome itself. This included the worship of the Lares and Penates, and this is what you said, the spirits specific to a family, with altars in the home. Festivals such as Lupercalia and Saturnalia, and a complex system of lucky and unlucky days. Another important aspect of religion of Roman times was the divinity of the emperor. More than just being the Pontifex Maximus, or the head of the Roman religion, Roman emperors endorsed the various popular cult religions. To enhance political loyalty amongst the populace, they often called the subjects to participate in the cults and revere the emperors as gods. Examples of this include the achievements of the divine Augustus, which are the two large bronze pillars in Rome, with the deeds of Augustus, Roman coins where the emperor is portrayed with a halo or a divine glow, temple inscriptions such as Divine Augustus Caesar, son of a god, imperator of a land and sea. And I can see where the Christians can come up with the son of God title from, because it wasn't the only dedicated to just Jesus, but this was a very commonly used title. And this is located in the Roman inscription in Myra, in Lycia.
Yeah, so just before we move on to the actual Christianity side, based off of that, do we have any comments or discussion points?
So at least from my end, I can just Zane, you go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say not really. I don't. For now, no. Later on, we'll do.
Yeah, my only comment in which was surprising is that even Augustus himself considered himself a son of a god, and it reminded me of Alexander, who also considered himself either a descendant of Hercules.
Well, I think most emperors consider themselves like divine, because like think about like So the best way I can put it is like, let's take a theater artist.
Yeah.
A popular theater artist or a popular actor nowadays, when he sees like the applause on him after a performance, is a pompous fuck, right?
Yeah.
Now think of how an emperor would feel conquering that much land.
Yeah.
Like Rajarajendra Chola literally named his people himself, changed his name to the King of King.
Mm.
Not even as his title, but his actual name was King of
King
King.
of Kings. Damn. Because I know the Iran Shahar
Who was that?
Rajarajendra Chola. So he was the emperor of the Chola Empire.
Yeah, Raj
The
Rajendra
Tamil
of
King.
Trolla.
Yeah,
Chola.
I've heard the name of that empire before.
Yeah, it's an ancient Indian empire, and
I'm
especially
doing an episode on them
No.
next week.
yeah, because they were
Yeah.
existed during the time of the rise of Islam too. This empire.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they lasted longer than the Roman Empire, and their empire went all the way from like Tamil Nadu, Sri Lanka, to if they went just a bit further, they would have touched Australia.
Yeah, because they were southeast was practically under the Chola Empire, practically.
Yeah,
Yeah. Is it called Chola?
yeah,
Yeah.
Chola as in like a chickpea.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, Chola empire. I'll look it up.
yeah. Now we're gonna move on to Christianity because this is the meat of the, and Christianity's history ties in with not only Judaism's history and Roman history, but also ties into Islamic history too, because a lot of the deities are saints we use in the Islamic text.
And it basically rules the world today.
Yes, and this religion rules the world today in an indirect sense. Even foreign policy is still affected by this godforsaken religion already. Eventually, it came to replace the older pantheon as the state religion. And the origins spring from Judaism. Though I will make a comment here, the exact split between Judaism and Christianity is still debated to this day. Because many people say around the time of Paul was where it officially split, or that's around the time of
Here
Jesus.
is the issue with that. Paul in the Ethiopic tradition is entirely different. He's like 180 from the Paul in the Latin tradition.
Yeah. And
So we don't even know if he is actually responsible for this or not.
Yeah, no, and the thing is, that's the general impression. However, we still find the 4th century, 6th, even up to the 7th century, there is a lot of overlap between Judaism and Christianity, and there's no like, it's impossible to find a distinct point where they cut off completely.
I mean,
I'd say when the Jews killed Jesus.
Debatable, very debatable. Because it's more complicated than that. Sorry, Nick. Ginny's gonna come into your dreams and say it's a lot more complicated than that.
it is, and I would argue that if you look at, for example, the Ethiopian Orthodox Tawahedo Church in
Yeah.
Ethiopia, you would see a lot of things you would recognize in Judaism still.
Still active.
Yeah.
Actively practiced.
Circumcision, for example.
Yeah.
Dietary rules. You have a lot of other things as well.
I'm guessing they still apply the kosher rule in the Ethiopic tradition.
Yes, yeah, they do.
Yeah, so now and this is a good point.
But they have different rules than what, and I mean, all Jewish sects have different rules with what is considered kosher and not.
Kosher and not, yeah.
And so they have developed their own traditions, but they do have a very, very similar legalistic viewpoint on it.
And then we move forward. Christianity, which originally developed as an offshoot of Judaism, with the followers believing that Jesus of Nazareth was the Messiah, though many people even argue, was he of Galilee? Was he of Bethlehem? That is another can of worms altogether, given the Gospels, that is. So Judaism of the Roman era was comprised of 4 distinct sects. So he points it out here. Sadducees, is that how it's pronounced?
It's actually some sort of it's a pa sound actually.
It's a Sadduqi.
Yeah.
That sounds like
But
Sadka.
originally, but it's I think it's Sadducees in
Yeah,
English
in
and the
English or
Pharisees.
yeah.
Yeah.
Arist-
Sadaqah is like when you give charity, and
Yeah,
Gotta do
Yeah.
the
and
charity.
truth
sadaqani
sayer.
is actually means
Sadduq.
believe me. The
Yes,
word
And
sadaqani in
just
Arabic means
to
believe me.
yeah, I want to bring up a small point where the C sound was actually quite rare in the Roman language.
Mm-hmm.
For example,
Yeah.
Caesar, we call it Caesar now because of our English accent, but originally in Latin
Yeah.
it's Kaiser.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the ka was the sound that was normally used. So
Yeah.
we'll say Sadducees, aristocratic Jews who cooperated with the Roman government,
Yeah.
and then we have the
Um
Pharisees. Yeah.
and also just Culture Ginny put I believe the Arabic in the private chat, just so you know.
Oh, perfect, perfect.
yeah, it's
Um,
that sound, but in Hebrew.
yeah. Also, drastic measures. I know I started early. Leaving Moose, loving Moose, returning to the 70s rock, leaves to sport Pakistani Ozzy Osbourne, except Moose speaks intelligible.
Right on, brother.
Yeah. Oh man. Oh man. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, is it the cough? That is. So you're referring to the letter off, Ginny.
Yes,
So
yes. So it's not a normal K sound,
yeah,
or the
it's not a
English
K,
case.
but it's a cough. Sadaqah. That is.
Yeah,
Okay.
because it comes from the same root as
Mm-hmm.
Sadiq or
The
Sadaqa.
yeah.
And that's how you
Telling it
pronounce
is
the
the
word
truth.
Quran as well. It's
Yeah.
actually
Yeah, yeah.
Quran. It's not Quran or
Okay.
Quran. It's Quran.
Yeah. Because the strong ka is the main word that's existing in the Arabic as well as the Persian and Urdu languages. So we have the Pharisees, strict adherence to the Jewish law. Then the Essenes, they were a messianic group, which lived a communal lifestyle and wrote many books, including the Dead Sea Scrolls. So, and then we have the Zealots, and I think Zealots. There's a book called The Zealot by Aslan. What's his name? Forget Raza Aslan. Yes, so it reminds me of that book. It was a military.
Aslan, you mean?
Aslan, yes, he's Aslan from Narnia. Militaristic group which was openly hostile to the Roman state and led the revolt of 66 AD, which resulted in destruction of Jerusalem and a massacre of at Masada. And this is a very significant event to the 66 AD massacre. Um, some people even state that Jesus was a zealot himself, but that's also debatable too, historically speaking, because he was practically like executed 30 plus years prior to this. Jesus of Nazareth, proclaimed to be the Messiah by his followers. His life is outlined in the Gospels. So these are the four, most of the Gospels, but the four canonical Gospels are Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. And the first three are more so like more historical. So the most historical I personally find is the Gospel of Mark, given that it was earlier. He was born in Bethlehem. Even this in itself is a bit debatable, depending on which Gospel you read. Raised as a carpenter, and the early years are undocumented. Yeah, but many feel he has spent some years in Egypt and was possibly educated by the Essenes. He was a follower of John the Baptist. The teachings of Jesus are unusual for the period and appeal to all segments of Roman society. Now, Jesus fulfilled Old Testament messianic prophecies, again, according to certain believers. All humans are created equal. One should serve his fellow man, only God, and should avenge wrongs. Humans should respect earthly law. Violence of any kind is wrong. And then Jesus was martyred. He angered the Pharisees, which is the elite Jewish class, and charges of heresy were brought against Jesus by the Pharisees during Passover week. The Roman procurator Pontius Pilate was pressured by the Pharisees to execute Jesus after the Jewish court, which is the Sanhedrin, refused to try him. He was then crucified by the Romans, 30 AD. Though some people say 33 AD or 33 CE. He was labeled the Christos, or the Anointed One, after his followers claimed he was resurrected. And
By the way, Messiah,
yeah,
or Messiah in Arabic, means
mhm,
the anointed one.
the anointed, or even Masih
The,
means
the,
anointed
yeah,
one.
yeah, the one that you have, done anointment on.
Yeah, and then we have also later, 600 years later, the Islamic belief that he was never um, crucified, which is another wormhole, rabbit hole we shouldn't go to at the moment. Um, the immediate followers of Jesus, the apostles, were martyred for their beliefs. So yeah, the martyrdom of the apostles. Andrew, he was crucified on an X-shaped cross in Greece.
I thought he was in prison in Romania.
Andrew? No, not Tate. We're not talking about Andrew Tate. Quiet, dear boy. He's still in prison and he's still awaiting, by the way, the bail hearing or something like that. Bartholomew was skinned alive. Yikes. Simon Peter, he was crucified upside down in Rome. James the Just, he was was cut by Herod Agrippa. John was beheaded in Ephesus, and Ephesus is where the origins of the seven sleepers of the cave comes from. Matthew, he was crucified in Greece. Thomas, martyred in India. James the Lesser, or the brother of Jesus, stoned to death. And Judas Iscariot, he committed suicide. And this one's the most famous one, the betrayer.
Why only 9? There were 12, so why only 9?
And the 9 were martyred. That is, they were killed. The
So
3
what about
remained.
the other 3 then?
Yeah. So we have Paul, and then what were
Yeah,
the
okay.
other 2? Nikhil or Ginny? I don't recall. Whatever happened to them?
The rest
Right
of
now,
the
neither do I.
we don't I don't think that it's written, at least in the Latin church tradition, of what happened with them. But I mean, if I looked into the Ethiopic one, there's probably exists something there. But because it's huge, they have all of these extremely long stories about all of these things.
Yeah.
So it would probably exist there. But even then, you could be you should be skeptical about those traditions as well. So let's just say that we don't know
Yeah.
as of yet.
We don't know what happened to them. And
Yeah,
technically,
fair
there
enough.
were 72 apostles or 72 followers, according to some historians. So that gets a really, the big number. The number gets bigger. Paul, a converted Jew, is the man most responsible for spreading the Christian faith throughout the Roman Empire. Almost 1/3 of the books of the New Testament is attributed to them. Yeah, so these are the letters he writes. Thessalonians. He writes, the different letters. What's his name? Crap, I forgot the names of the letters. But these are various letters written by Paul that are the early parts of. These came before the Gospels too, mind you. These were written before the Gospels, and these were written like 20 years roughly after Jesus's alleged crucifixion, and they don't mention a virgin mother at all in those. The interesting fact, they don't mention a virgin mother. They do mention that he was a divine, like they do mention he's a son of God, but the specifics are extremely slim with the letters. That is, the letters he writes Romans, he writes different letters that he writes. So Galatians as well, 1 and 2. There's also 2 parts with these letters. So yeah, Paul has a lot of letters that he writes to different locations, different churches. So he was born Saul of Tarsus. He had a conversion on the road to Damascus. Basically, he used to hate the followers of Christianity, but then he had this vision. So on a special mission became the conversion of the non-Jew Gentile to Christianity. So religious ceremonies developed slowly and now accepted as sacraments to the church. Baptism was the slow symbolizing the washing away of the sin and rebirth, and was popularized by John the Baptist. The Holy Eucharist, symbolized by the Last Communion with Jesus and his followers. This practice actually became very controversial because of the concept of transubstantiation. And then there's another ritual, confirmation, a ritual.
This is then just to clarify. This is the entire thing about Jesus being in the bread and in the
Yes.
wine as the blood and
Yes,
flesh
yes,
of
yes.
Jesus, and which made early Christianity look like a cannibal cult to
Yeah.
the Romans, and the Romans didn't like those kind of religious
those
practices.
kind of practices, yeah. Confirmation, a ritual celebration of adulthood, penance, confession of a sin, ordination, passing on of a power. This sacrament established the authority of church leadership. Matrimony became considered a religious rite. Celibacy of priests came much later.
And when they say celibacy, they mean towards woman.
Yeah. Of course, I know you're gonna do the little nod towards children. Extreme.
How can I not?
Celibacy is also one thing that more or less only evolved much later in the Roman Catholic tradition. It didn't evolve in the same way in the churches of the East.
Yeah.
That's to say, the the Syriac churches, or in the Miaphysite churches like the Coptic and
Yeah.
Ethiopic church.
Yeah. And then we have the extreme unction. What is the unction? The last rites before death. Interesting.
That's the death rituals when you're just about to die and the priest is going to comes to do the last prayers upon you. And then it also carries over to after you have died.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned here that this was several hundred years later, the tradition, especially of celibacy, that came. And also, yeah, this is the last rites before death. So, yeah, this is an interesting point that you bring up. Then we mentioned that early Christianity was influenced by other religions, these existing religions. It wasn't born out of, thin air, yes. Judaism, of course, the biggest influence is Judaism. The concept of the Messiah and the Old Testament were integral to early Christian thought. And it was a supernova of different ideas too. There wasn't exactly like one Christian group. There was several ideas that propped up during that time, as evident by the Dead Sea Scrolls. So we even had certain Christian groups or early Christian groups condemning the Old Testament God and accepting a new God who was a more universal God. So it was very interesting beliefs the early Christians had that eventually became the more mainstream beliefs then started to take over. Then we have Mithraism, and I heard Aaron Ra mention this too, Mithras, which influenced Christianity. And it was a Persian religion associated with Zoroastrianism, which became the unofficial cult of the Roman army. Open only to men, Mithraism seems to have had an impact on early Christian practices, including celebrating December 25th as Jesus' birthday, celebration of Sunday as the Sabbath, and baptism of the blood.
The thing with Mithraism is that it was pretty much, think about Zoroastrianism, but if you made Zoroastrianism into the most warlike religion you could imagine.
Wow. And that actually influenced Christianity, modern Christianity.
It was called the warriors' religion. It wasn't as extreme as, for example, the Assyrians' religion, but it was very, Mithraism gave a lot of praise to soldiers, to doing your duty to the greater godly order and such. It's actually quite interesting how it died, despite being so in
popular.
Many ways so popular and expansionistic, and even rather intolerant, I would say.
Yeah.
And yet it died out despite that.
Yeah, because again, if it's compared to, let's say, a militaristic religion, like we'll say Islam, for example, very expansionist, that survived and actually had a very significant impact. Mithras didn't last long.
Though Mithraism didn't have the kind of convert to die attitude, it just had kind
Right.
of protect the religion, so it was kind of reactionary in that way rather than proactive. That
Probably.
might be a bit of it, but I'm still quite surprised that actually it died out and got replaced by Christianity.
Or maybe not necessarily placed, but like kind of absorbed by Christianity in a way.
Yeah,
Um,
that too.
yeah. Then we have Stoicism, which is acceptance of fate regardless of circumstances, was evident during the Christian persecutions. So there was this idea, and along this idea, accepting the persecution, along this idea, many theorized that hell was also introduced as an idea that the sinners will be punished for persecuting you in the afterlife. Though I might be wrong because there's also Sheol in the older Jewish beliefs too.
There are also Jewish beliefs that there are punishments in the
Mhm.
afterlife and not
Yeah.
just a dead base. So this isn't a new thing with Christianity.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a very popular view or thing that is talked about much in modern Judaism, but during this day it was.
Yeah, early Judaism, yes, and Neoplatonism, which is interesting, revival of Plato's concept of reality of ideas, and his concentration of the last days affected Christianity, which is interesting. The last days.
Yeah, very much. You shouldn't focus on the earthly. You should focus upon the divine idea.
Interesting.
It isn't action that is important, but the ideal.
Which makes it interesting. And then the early church organization copied the leadership pattern of the Roman Empire. So a deacon led each local congregation. A bishop oversaw several deacons. The archbishop developed to see large bishoprics. And eventually, the Bishop of Rome became the unofficial leader of the church and gained the title of the Pope.
Actually, at the beginning, it wasn't even that. It was more like there were several. There was like the not the Pope, but the patriarchs, because the Pope was first referred to as a patriarch. Pope is a little bit later.
A later title that was, yeah.
But patriarchs, like the Patriarch of Rome, the Patriarch of Constantinople, the Patriarch of Alexandria, the Patriarch of Antioch,
yeah,
and so forth.
Yeah, so they were combined. Like Patriarch was the original, like the big title.
Yes, and this is why in the Roman Orthodox churches,
yeah,
why they are actually kind of considered. Though the Patriarch of Constantinople is considered the finest among peers. He isn't the leader of them directly.
Right.
He's just kind of he has an exalted position, but he doesn't have rulership over the others. They are independent churches.
Yeah.
But in communion with each other.
Yeah. And it says here, the first bishop of Rome was Simon Peter, the apostle.
Yes, Petrus.
Yeah. And then we come to the early persecution of the Christians. It was sporadic, but very cruel. The Roman government and citizenry were generally tolerant of early Christianity since they posed no threat to the government. The most vocal opponents of the early church comes from the Jewish religion. Only when the Christians refused to participate in emperor worship did they begin to be persecuted in large numbers. Nero was the first emperor to persecute Christian followers on a large scale. And by the way, 666 is actually code for Nero. So apparently in the end days, according to the Revelations, Nero is supposed to come back from the dead. Persecution reached its height during the reign.
Sorry to cut you off. Who is Nero?
Nero is one of the Roman emperors, right?
Yeah.
He's rather infamous because he was considered one of the bad emperors, or one of those emperors that are used as an example of brutal, crazy emperors.
Yeah,
he's the guy that
is Caligula, Nero, and
Diocletian. We have
Diocletian is considered actually a pretty good emperor, but he was very brutal against the Christians.
Commodus is considered one of the weird ones too.
Yeah.
And just so you know, uh, Nero's the guy that waged war on Poseidon and went and stabbed the sea.
Yeah,
I've heard of Poseidon.
and there's a
So
famous
anyway,
saying.
is Nero dead or alive?
Yeah, he
Is
was.
Nero dead or alive?
He's dead.
That, but according to
how is
Christian
he coming
tradition,
back
he's going to be returned to life at the end of
Yeah.
days.
Yeah, that's why. Even though people say 666 is actually the devil, but that's actually code for Nero coming back to life, and that's where
So
also
is
the
this
Antichrist. He's the Antichrist.
is this mainstream belief, or is it just some sect that has basically
It's
It's
actually
minority?
No, this is from Revelations. This is from the
yeah.
Revelation.
Revelation is kind of weird.
So I would say
This is
it's
one of the,
mainstream,
the,
yeah?
the
It's
interpretations
mainstream.
of it. Yes, yes.
one-
Roman Catholic mainstream.
All right.
yeah. So it's kind of mainstream. And what's funny is that there's a phrase which say that when Rome was burning, he was playing the flute or something like that.
Playing the fiddle.
Yeah, the
What?
fiddle. However, that in itself has turned out to be a big myth because he was trying to do something about the capital, and he was trying to actually fix the situation because it was when the fire happened.
Yeah.
I mean, the problem
Yeah,
is that
when
Nero
you-
had a
when you
lot of
talk about-
enemies, but he was also kind of, yeah, that persecution by Nero, unlike the later one by Diocletian, might have just been due to his fancy of wanting a scapegoat.
Yeah,
But when it came to Diocletian, here you get the really brutal persecutions.
yeah, because like with Nero, he was just scapegoating Christians practically.
Yeah.
When you
And
talk
Nero,
about Christian persecution, when
Yeah.
you talk about Christian persecution by the Jews because they accepted the Messiah, this is very similar to what the Ahmadis believe about their beliefs and their Messiah. And they
Yeah.
compared their persecution with the same persecution that the Christians went through. Because they would say that we are the ones who accepted the Messiah, which is, a prophet that they've got, which the mainstream Muslims don't believe in. According to them, he's the Messiah, the latter-day Messiah. So
Yeah.
because they believed in him, they believe that the mainstream Muslims are persecuting us, and eventually we're going to succeed, and we
Yeah.
will be the mainstream version of Islam, but that's going to take time and a lot of persecution and a lot of sacrifice.
Yeah.
So they compare their own persecution with that persecution.
Yeah. I find them.
So yeah, it's all
They're-
about interpretation.
Yeah, I find that their history is more likely going to take the direction of the Mormons, or the Mormon Church. That is.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
'Cause it's given
But
the
it's
time.
not a successful movement.
Yeah, because it's not as successful. Generally, still a strong minority, which will at least have some power, but not as successful. Let's say.
They don't have a single state, not one.
Yeah.
There are 57 Muslim countries, not one of them is Ahmadi.
Oh no, I'm talking
To
about.
be honest, though, it took hundreds of years for Christianity to become the state religion
Yeah.
in
it took us 100 years.
any polity. Do you know what the first
Yeah.
country to convert to, or kingdom to convert to Christianity was?
Which one?
Armenia.
Huh. Interesting. Interesting.
Then
Well,
came Rome, and then and just a couple of years later was Ethiopia
Interesting.
officially recognized as having
As a state religion,
Christian-
yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
strange name. that
But
one.
Constantine said that he was Christian, but the state religion didn't actually become the state religion. Christianity
Yeah.
didn't become the state religion until Theodosius the First, at
Right.
least 100 years later,
Yeah.
about 100 years.
Yeah, it just
Yeah.
it just Christianity just happened to become popular because of said emperor.
Yes, in Rome, but in Ethiopia they had actually converted and become the state religion before Rome. So
Before
technically, technically it is like this. Ethiopia had Christianity as state religion before Rome,
Yeah,
but they had the first ruler between
Mhm.
Rome and Ethiopia and Exum, because this is Exum, was that Constantine was the first Christian ruler of those
Mm.
two empires, or those two great powers. But
So then
it
that might be
they
true then,
were the
because
so Rome
the
is
Ahmadiyya
either considered
community
the
then a lot.
Yeah.
second to convert to Christianity, or the third, depending upon how you count it.
Which makes it
Well,
interesting.
this
Yeah.
movement is all over the world too. I mean, it doesn't have a state, but it is all over the world. It's in literally every country,
Yeah, and I'm thinking
especially the
Rome,
Western countries.
yeah, I'm guessing because Rome became more the Roman conversion, or at least the Rome it becoming the state religion was a lot more influential. It probably affected historians or warped their view of like how Christianity actually grew. So
Yeah, I mean, a lot of modern historians realize the fact that Christianity evolved all over the place in very different
it was
environments and
very
in very
different. Yeah, it wasn't a linear movement, as you say, right? It's not
No,
exactly.
it wasn't like Islam at all. Which was when one of my usual viewers on my channel said
Yeah.
that he wanted to that I make this kind of fine graph about the various subsects of Christianity evolving from the first type of Christianity, like I did with Islam.
Mm.
I just felt, oh god, this isn't going to be possible.
Yeah, because it's a very different kind of a growth. It's all over the place. It's like a weird supernova that just explodes in different places.
It's very messy.
Yeah, it's a
And-
huge, messy history. And
But it's impressive. I mean,
Yeah.
the more you go into Christian history, the more you realize that this religion it deserves some respect in certain ways.
in certain
Just
ways,
due to its
how it grew, yes, for sure. Then you also have like how it was systematically, like how they established the system. However,
Guys, do
Escalon-
you remember? Do you remember the first time I was on this podcast?
I do remember, yes.
Yeah, and I gave it so much respect that people actually thought I was a Christian. Remember?
Yeah, I think you were talking about how you looked into the Christian beliefs and how it contradicted a lot of like the Islamic beliefs. That is,
Yeah,
and
and
how like
it's contradiction as well, but mainly because the Christian claim is ours is the original, Islam is plagiarized. Islamic belief is ours is the final version, and Islam is, Christianity is basically corrupted. So
yeah,
I was trying to tally the two. So
yeah,
I was telling the story, and I went into a little bit of detail, and then the co-hosts though and the people who came on the live call, they were all asking me, "You're a Christian, yeah?" And I believe Pio was also watching the show, and he was commenting that. So is Zayn a Christian now? I had to clarify
Yeah.
2 or 3 times. No,
no, I
guys,
think
I'm not.
you were sort of looking at it from a more historical perspective. Like they came first,
Yeah.
they made the
Yeah.
story. They're kind of OGs. They got it. Kind of makes them OG. They're more reliable, historically speaking.
You have to do that. You have to, if you want to know where this information comes from, because obviously I'm telling my story of how I left the faith. So you have when you're doing that, then you have to know where the information is coming from, and
And when you kind of like debunk certain religions, like let's just say Christianity or Islam or Judaism, you have to study one or the other to actually know the origins, so to speak. Especially Judaism and Christianity, you have to study them to know where these beliefs came from.
Yeah. On my own channel, I'm thinking of doing a video where I give the basic reasons why Christianity is the original version of Islam. Not
Which
the
is an
original version of faith altogether, because obviously
Yeah.
it came from somewhere too. You
Yeah.
have to say Judaism is the original version of Christianity. And then that one, that came from somewhere as well. It's always got roots.
Yeah. And it was a very
But-
interesting idea. It's a very interesting idea for a video.
Yeah, but I think I should put like 3 or 4 points why Christianity is the original version and Islam is not the final word like they say it is.
Yeah. No, that would be, but be very careful, people who start accusing you of being Christian, because I know I posted something about the story
Again?
of Ephesus.
Not again.
Yeah, it's like the story of Ephesus, how it evolved from 3 different Christian stories into the Quran. And if you're
Well,
like,
it's
oh,
still-
are you a Christian?
Better than being accused of being a Jew or a Qadiani or a Hindu.
Yeah, well, I've already got Ahmadi as well too. I've got Ahmadi.
So Zane,
I've been
I got
accused of being a-
so Zane, I got a question. How much is Israel paying you to say this stuff?
My check last week was $3,200,000.
Oh no!
Yeah, and the week before that, the Hindu gods gave me a good chunk of cash. I think Vishnu and Brahma they sent me a few crores.
And here I am actually being paid by Palestinians. Here I am. Should be asking Israelis for money. Oh well.
Yeah, and the Ahmadis send me money too sometimes, but don't tell anyone.
But yeah, now back to the emperor. So Nero, being the first one, he persecuted Christians on a large scale. But yeah, Ginny mentioned the height reached in Diocletian's reign, who attempted to systematically eliminate the followers, and then Christianity finally became legal during the reign of Constantine with the Edict of Milan in 312 AD or CE, depending on.
Also, Moose, sorry to interrupt. I just want to ask, am I stupid or does academically have two E's in it?
Now you're now making me think of the spelling itself. Hang on, I have to type it in the comments. Hang on.
Look, I just put it. So I basically got this alert from a preschool I was looking for a little relative.
Yeah.
And they have an academically enriched curriculum, and this is how they spell it.
Oh no! How many? Oh no! Oh no! Take your little one out of there. Take your little one out of there. Put your little one in there, please.
I just got a notification, and I'm like, did my dyslexia start again?
No. You're corrected this time. Yeah, keep your little one away from that school. That's some very suspicious school. That's the kind of stuff I see in Pakistan, never in Canada. Oh man. Well, yeah. Anyway, we're back to the Christian Rome. Early heresies concerned the nature of Jesus, threaten the new beliefs of the Christian Church. So these are certain people considered heretics, I would say.
From the Roman Catholic tradition,
from the
many of
Roman
these
tradition.
actually did become the foundation for other church traditions. I mean, when it comes to, for example, Doicetists, those are actually sometimes reoccurring in certain church traditions as kind of a mystical tradition. So they were rejected by the Roman church tradition, but then later reintroduced in certain mystical groups. So those are kind of like back and forth through history. Then you have with Nestorianism, followers of Nestor believe that God dwelt in the body of Jesus like a temple. Jesus was merely a vessel. This is actually a pretty. It is wrong. That was their metaphor for it. But they were just like the regular Roman Catholic tradition. The Ephesus, they believed that Jesus had two natures, one divine, one human. In one. But the thing is that what they did think was that they were separate. They were even more of a Diaphysites than the Roman Church, and they thought that through being this sort of connection, they used Jesus as an example of how the human could reach the divine and come into contact with the divine. This has mystical backgrounds in it.
Yeah.
And this was very problematic to the Roman Catholic Church. We saw it as kind of like the human becoming divine rather than what the Nestorians and what the churches of the East, like the Syriac Church, would argue to be the case. The Assyrian Church of the East or the Persian Church of the East have these views that that you can reach the divine. You don't become the divine, but you reach the divine. Just like Jesus was human
Yeah. And
had the God. They're like we are vessels for the divine.
that's the Nestorians. And you have like the Docetists stated that they believe the human body of Jesus is a phantom.
Yeah,
But then
yes, they believe that, and I say that that one comes back from time to time, even in Roman Catholic tradition. So that one isn't actually that. It
That's
was
different.
considered a strong heresy at the beginning, but then it comes back, and then it's condemned again, and then back again. It's one of those things that a lot of people have a lot of opinion on.
Yeah. And then we have the Monophysites.
Or the Miaphysites are a
Yeah.
better term, because Monophysites are actually distinct from Miaphysites, but
Yeah.
they can be shared under the
Yeah.
same umbrella. They are they actually the Monophysite believes that Jesus was fully divine, but the Miaphysites believe that Jesus was just of one nature, a combined nature, that he didn't have two natures in one, but he was one nature.
Yeah. 'Cause
No,
they
not
believe,
wholly divine, but not wholly human, but one nature, not two aspects of him,
yeah.
like in the Catholic Church. And Miaphysites are those that are like the Coptic Church and the Ethiopic Church.
And then we have Arianism. That is.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. And then
and
yeah, go ahead.
here he taught that Jesus was like an angel in that he was a perfect being,
Right.
a blameless prophet that couldn't do any wrong.
Ah. And I feel like
This is the same view as Islam has on prophets, by the way.
yeah, it's very similar to the Islamic view of prophets that they are not.
And I have some suspicion that Arianism might have been the main source from where Muhammad took a lot of his ideas for Islam.
Yeah, this definitely is a very a very likely situation, and it definitely affected Christianity to some extent.
The Arians were totally, they were also extremely brutal and extremely fanatical. I mean, the name vandalism it comes from the Vandals, which was a Germanic group.
Yeah.
And they were Aryans. And the reason why we talk about vandalism and destroying things is that the Vandals destroyed any sort of pictures of Jesus or statues or like, because they thought that it was polytheistic worship.
Yeah. And then we have, this is an interesting one. And I've heard many theories about this, Gnosticism. Was there a specific Gnostic group? What do you think, Jenny?
I don't think that. I think Gnosticism wasn't one thing. It was several, mystical groups but even some Gnostic, ideas even survived. It wasn't one thing. It was a very nebulous thing. Just general early Christian mysticism.
Yeah, and it's a belief in mysticism led to the monastic movement. And it's said here that the Holy Spirit was superior to either God or Jesus. The Gnostic influence can be seen in the New Testament, particularly in the Gospel of John. So, and even Religion for Breakfast, one of my favorite channels, by the way, he talks about this. And there's no like singular idea with Gnosticism. Like
No,
it's
I am
all
actually.
over the place.
I was actually studying under a professor when I studied from a bachelor in religion, who had studied these, old manuscripts from the Gnostics, the
Yeah.
Dead Sea Scroll, and he let me read these. And it's quite interesting how they describe gods as having lower and higher aspects,
Interesting.
and how he becomes degraded by the mortal, world, the inferior world, and you have to go into the higher realms to see the truly divine sublime.
Yeah, and now we have the church councils were held to settle many of the questions of early Christianity. Now, one of the more famous one is the Council of Nicaea.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody knows about the Council of Nicaea, called in 325 by Constantine, to settle the question of the nature of Jesus. There's a very big misconception in casual viewers. A lot of, and I think it's been cleared. People say, "Oh, that," and this myth was perpetrated by none other than the writer of the Da Vinci Code. What's his fucking name?
Dan Brown.
Dan Brown.
Oh God,
This idiot.
please.
This
I had to
idiot-
read that book when I was in, the school level just before university for my
Yeah.
English.
Man, this idiot practically posted so many myths about Christianity. And then when I actually studied it, I was like, oh, no, this guy was wrong. I used to believe it because I was fucking 14. I will apologize for the F word. But yeah, this was not about whether Jesus was a God or a son of God. Like, that wasn't the issue. That was not the issue. They already believed he was the son of a God. That was not addressed in this. That was actually accepted, widely accepted as an idea. So them deciding that, oh, he was the son of God, then that's completely incorrect.
Actually, they did condemn during the Nicene Council. They did condemn Arianism.
They condemned Arianism, right? The Arianism, like it says here, is more so like he's an angel, and not human. Whereas,
Yeah, in kind of it, like, he's still human, but he's like the perfect human.
Yeah, and I think there's also the idea of like he was a son of God, which was decided in that council. No, that's incorrect, because the idea that he was a son of God was already within the letters of Paul. That already is established 300 years earlier.
You have to remember, Lou, that before this, you haven't even established the church canon of what the Bible is.
Yes.
So you have different groups of Christians in the Council of Nicaea with different versions of the Bibles.
Yeah.
And remember, Paul in the Ethiopic tradition is completely different in many regards from the Roman Latin tradition.
Yeah.
Which means that he could certainly, if you look at the Silver Bible, which is the Orion Bible, it's a later Bible among the Goths, then you will see that they don't do those references.
Interesting. Which makes it very interesting. But
so it entirely depends upon which Bible you have, and they haven't even codified what a true Bible for Christians are.
So it's not the council that decided whether, that Jesus was a son of God or not, but rather the nature of Jesus. That was the issue. And it was attended mostly by Eastern bishops, which was very surprising. It was mostly by Eastern bishops.
Yes, because Christianity was still pretty weak in West.
Yeah, it was more of an Eastern religion at this point. And result of the Nicene Creed, or the Apostles' Creed, which defined the nature of Jesus in terms of the Trinity. Arianism, like you said earlier, although weakened, persisted in the Middle Ages. So yeah, Arianism was kind of very heavily criticized here. Now, the Council of Carthage, however, was held in 397 to formulate the canon of the church.
Yes, this is the Roman Catholic canon tradition.
The Roman
the Ethiopic Church and the Armenian Church have already departed from these church councils. They were actually present there, having their own ambassadors there and speaking at these councils. But after before in some earlier church councils between these, they actually left because they didn't want to participate, because they felt that the Roman Catholic Church was
and
no longer a legitimate church.
And what's interesting is that many of the books, like, they were attributed to the apostles, but we can clearly see they were not necessarily written by the apostles themselves. Especially when you consider gospels like the Gospel of Mark, for example. We can definitely say it was written by somebody else, not the historical Mark. So the council was presented with these books by the apostles, and they voted on which ones to accept into the Bible. This is in 397. This is not even Nicaea. This is 72 years after Nicaea. And those that left out became as known as the Apocrypha, or the hidden books. Now, what's funny is that the Apocrypha definitely also has an influence in the Islamic texts, certain books of the Apocrypha does have influence in the Islamic scripture. The apocalyptic books by Peter and James, allegorical books such as The Shepherd of Hermas, and several books of Acts such as that of Andrew. They were kind of like left out, but they became the hidden books, that is. And even many mainstream Christians, when they kind of come across these books, they get very surprised that these books actually exist. Revelation was accepted by one vote. Damn. That actually got close to getting kicked out. Now, canon was mainly comprised of the 4 Gospels, the letters or epistles of the apostles, mainly of Paul, many of them the letters of Paul. Like I said, the 4 Gospels, 3 of them being synoptic, which is Mark, Matthew, and Luke being synoptic, and then the 4th one, John, being more like very esoteric. The literature of the Essenes was completely ignored, which is interesting. I actually did not know the literature of the Essenes. So this is something I would love to look into. So this was the result of 397. We're in almost 400 years to the birth of Christianity. Several church leaders helped form the doctrine and theology of the early church. So we have many church leaders situated here. So the very first known one was Ignatius, who reigned from 85 to 107, a bishop of Antioch. He first coined the term Catholic.
Catholic means common.
Right.
Or
Well,
of the mass.
The mass or the common.
You know, the funny thing is, do you know what do you know what the term for of the mass, or you know, the common populace is in Arabic?
What is it?
Jama'ah.
Oh, the Jamaat or Jama'ah.
Yes.
So Jamaat it's also a term for, like, you know, praying in the Jamaat or playing.
No, that is Jamia. It comes from the same root.
There's also a term called Jamaat itself. Jamia
Yes,
is there's also Jamaat in Urdu. We call it
Alright.
like praying in a Jamaat or praying with the common people.
Yes,
Yeah.
and you have also heard the term
nikah mean?
Ahl-Sunnati wal Jama'ati,
Mm-hmm.
which is, you know, the people of the tradition and of the masses.
Right.
What does the word
So-
nikah mean in Arabic?
The word nikah.
Nikah means just marriage.
Mm-hmm.
It
No, it
has a
doesn't.
modern meaning that is very different, and that I don't want to say here because it's the F word.
What? It's what? It's what?
The
Why
F
don't you
word.
wanna
It's
say it?
sometimes
Oh.
Yeah, that's correct.
That's
A rude
what
way
it
of saying intercourse.
He's right. Yeah.
Interesting.
That's it.
Okay. So these terms
but that's
are
a more a modern thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
No, but
Okay.
from what I heard, the literal meaning of the word nikah is the F word.
Interesting. Very
Is that
interesting.
not true?
No, it's the other way around. Because it comes from an older word in other languages, which has also to do with marriage. Then it later became to just do the F.
Okay.
So
This is very
when they
interesting.
say that the Prophet did nikah with this or that person, or that some of the Sahaba did nikah with this or that woman or slave girl, is that not referring to intercourse? Is it referring to marriage?
It could refer to both.
Yeah.
It could be an euphemism. I mean,
But what does the word mean in that context?
I think it's a bit of
it
both.
depends upon very
Yes.
much context.
Because I think with
It's complicated, is it?
Yeah, it's a lot more complicated because keep in mind, with marriage, definitely came sex for sure. That
Yes.
was the agreement. Whether it was a temporary, whether it was a
Well,
permanent.
with or without, actually. With or without.
Yeah, with or without, whether it was temporary, whether it was permanent, it came with sex. That was the guarantee. So, and even with modern interpretations, the sex is actually mandatory in marriage.
Marriage was the optional thing, actually.
In
Yeah.
certain, for if you had slaves,
Marriage
yes.
was the optional thing, actually.
It depends. Depends on the if it was a slave woman or a free woman. That is, with a slave girl, that's optional. With a free woman,
Yeah.
you kind of have to marry her. So it really depended on the status of the person too.
Yeah.
So, Yeah, it was
Yeah.
definitely an
Just
interesting. Yeah.
yeah,
It then
just something I wanted to put out there.
yeah. Then we have back to the church leaders here. So we went into Nikon fucking Justin the Martyr, 3rd century CE, a legendary figure whose apology to Antonius Pius in defense of Christianity had a great impact on future writings. Then we have Irenaeus, one of the famous 115 to 200. He was a bishop of Lyon. He opposed Gnosticism and was the main promulgator of the cult of the Virgin Mary. Then we have Tertullian. He reigned from 160. Well, is this the reign or is it? Oh, this is the lifetime. Never mind. Or is it the reign or the lifetime, Nick? Nick, where are you at?
My bad, I was muted.
Yeah, that's okay. Is this
that
the
was-
reign or the lifetime?
That was the lifetime.
Okay. And what about Ignatius? That's a very short. Is it a reign or a lifetime?
Pardon?
The Ignatius, 85 to 107 CE.
Oh no, I think for here my bad. I put down the
reign, right?
reigns, the reign.
Yeah. But then, yeah, the rest is more lifetime. Okay, so he lived from 160 to 220. Okay, more believable. He wrote extensively on the morals of the early church, and he was eventually excommunicated, which is interesting. He was a bishop of Carthage. By the way, Carthage being North Africa in North Africa.
Tunisia.
Yeah, Tunisia. Oregon, 185 to 254. He wrote over 6,000 books to harmonize Christian thought. I'll just correct this. Thought with Greek philosophy. He was also later excommunicated. Then we have Ambrose, who was the bishop of Milan, 340 to 397. He established the concept of church leaders having power over secular rulers. This is where it gets interesting, that they would be more powerful than the secular rulers. Then we have Jerome from 340 to 420, who was an expert linguist, and he translated the Hebrew writings into Latin. His version of the Bible, the Vulgate, became the official version up to the Renaissance. And I had a Catholic who would say, oh, the Vulgate is the true Bible, that is. And, so because it was the Bible of Jerome. So it was an interesting point he brought up. Then we have Augustine, 354 to 430. He was the greatest of the Latin fathers. He was a bishop of Hippo, whose writings included the City of God and his Confessions. He is considered the primary theologian of the early church and had great influence on the concepts of original sin, salvation by grace, and the sacraments. So we see right here that there's
Augustine is actually very good, reading.
Yeah.
This is one of those few things that I actually consider should be in the canon. If you want to consider yourself cultured in Western traditions, you have to at least have read Augustine.
If anything, that would make me want to check him out.
Most Drastic Measures has a comment for you.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna going to heckle for the Muslims to join the story. Bring on darn it, Drastic. Not now. I'm gonna heckle for the Muslims to join the story. Bring on the crusade. Darn it, quiet. Calm down, boy. Calm down. We're getting there. Okay. So then we have the symbols of the early church. They were used because the Christians often hid from the persecutions of the emperors. So the early Christians were also hesitant to artistically portray Jesus. The first artistic representation of Jesus depicts him as a young man with short hair, void of beard, and wearing a rough garment of a Roman peasant.
So is this did they have their own version of Charlie Hebdo back in the day?
Probably. This was their version of Charlie Hebdo. Traditional depiction did not arise until the Middle Ages. So they really did not like the depiction, or they were just scared of depiction.
Actually, the Western church tradition, where actually they did do it in the first, in the first 600 years, but it didn't catch on in the East until much later, and the East was actually the last ones to adopt icons, but they are the ones that have actually kept the tradition the strongest after
Yeah.
that.
And then we have also the cross, which was widely used as a Christian symbol until the 50th century. I mean, it's still used as the Christian symbol.
Yes.
It still is. And the earliest Christian symbols were the fish and the peacock. This one's interesting because peacock is also the Yazidi symbol too.
And there is a lot of things that have to do with mystical tradition associated with the peacock.
Peacock, and then the fish. I know the pescatarian symbol.
Yeah, the sermon about the fish.
Hmm.
And it also, there exists another reason as to why you do it, because it's easier to imagine the fish symbol. If you have seen it, it's very easy to draw. It's just two
lines,
two sea bends.
Yeah.
And that also meant that when you during the times when Christianity was persecuted, you could easily draw it just one bend. And if the other one understood what you were doing, the other one would complete it and make the fish.
Right.
Thus communicating that you were both Christians.
Ah, interesting.
So it kind of was a code. Hey, are you a believer?
Yeah. That's a very
you could ask it without in such a way that an unbeliever wouldn't understand it.
That was interesting.
This is some spy shit.
Yeah. Now, and then we.
Hey, if you were a persecuted minority in the Roman Empire, you would do that shit too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey.
Drastic has another.
I have to literally hide too in the country of Pakistan too. Like I have to hide my belief as well, and basically disappear from Gin and Tonic. Even though Gin and Tonic, the channel is not visible, but the videos are, which is very strange. Like you said earlier, the YouTube algorithm works in mysterious ways.
It's a scientific miracle. But Drastic Measures has another comment for you.
Oh dear Lord. I always loved that Bill Hicks line. The last thing Jesus wants to see if he comes back is another cross. yeah, that's the last thing he wants to see is another cross, because that's where he was executed on.
It'll give him serious PTSD if he sees one.
Oh, definitely. Some serious PTSD. And then
just imagine.
I know, right? Some massive PTSD. What makes it? And then there is a joke that's saying, "What makes them think I like crosses?" So there's a very widespread joke. Then we have the final point. Music was not widely used until its standardization by Pope Gregory I. He reigned from 590 to 604 in the form of Gregorian chants. So then we have monasticism and asceticism develop as important parts of the early movement. So the monasticism is a desire to bring about the union of one's soul with God. Then we have asceticism, the complete renunciation of all worldly temptations. Then you have these concepts had been in existence as evidenced by John the Baptist and the Essene movement. Jesus taught salvation through renunciation. Stoicism also taught a peace through detachment from worldly things. I had a friend who's weirdly obsessed with Stoicism for some reason.
It's a philosophical tradition as well.
Yeah. No, keep in mind, this person is the complete opposite. Not shitting on anybody, but this person is the complete opposite of what you call Stoic. The monasteries became the centers of preservation of classical learning and the transfer of that knowledge in modern times. Then the early monastics included Anthony of Egypt. He was considered the father of the monasticism, and he lived in a cave for many years. Geez, that's going to give you so many hallucinations.
And not Mark Anthony, but like Anthony.
Yeah. And he lived for 105 years. Damn. Man must have been old. 356. And then we have Saint Simeon, a legendary figure who reportedly lived atop a pole in Damascus for 30 years. Weird. Then we have Benedict of Nursia, the head of the Monte Cassino. Not the casino. He is considered the most important figure in the monastic movement. He has established the rules for monasteries, which or allowed followed throughout the Middle Ages.
One funny thing is that he was one of those, the Benedict. He's the father of the Benedict monk order as well. But Benedict of the Nursia, there is a lot of stories about how strict he was and how he lived his own life that strictly, and people that were around him thought that it was insufferable due to this. So they tried to kill him.
Wow.
But he survived all of their attempts.
So
basically, he survived like assassination attempts.
Yes, made by his own, because he wanted to create this kind of church order, and it became so famous for being so pious. So everyone wanted to be there, but no one that was there wanted to be there.
So it was hard to follow one of those church orders, but it was like the ideal sort of.
Yeah, so he was. Everyone wanted to be under him due to the fact that he was considered the most pious, most best church, father there, but church order leader. But the problem was that everyone that was under him hated him and tried to kill him.
Wow!
Because he was so strict.
Wow, that's that's quite dark if you think about it. Then we have what do you call it?
I mean, he even they said it was only their own fault since he actually wanted to turn away most people from his order.
Wow. So he really he tried to turn people away, like only choosing who's worthy, but then ended up like, kind of shooting himself in the foot, so to speak.
No, it was that people wanted to be under him because it gave prestige. If you were in this sort of strict order, it would have given you prestige during this time because it was temporary order service. And he said, I'm going to be so strict, so I don't want you here. But people still came because it was, he had gained such a reputation for being so pious. Yeah. But some people that were in his order became so sick of the hyper strict rules that he enforced that they tried to kill him. But they failed every time.
Yeah, it only became natural. Like, you were...
They tried to poison his, bread. And then then a raven took his bread.
Mm.
So it didn't happen. They tried to poison his, wine chalice, but the guy that was to bring it to him dropped it.
Oh no!
And they tried to stab him as well.
Oh no!
With a knife, but he survived it and actually managed to overpower his assailant.
Oh damn! So if anything, this makes it very interesting. The story of Benedict. So
yeah,
damn, this guy was very strict.
I also suspect a lot that since many of these were noblemen that went into his coven, I do suspect a lot that he was actually a pretty hardcore dude himself.
Yeah, I do suspect that too.
I mean, if he managed to overpower a nobleman,
yeah, yeah, he could definitely, But anyway, now we have the reasons Christianity succeeded while others failed. And again, this is sort of like an overview. Now, the church doctrines of the Trinity, virgin birth, and resurrection, ordination, salvation appealed to the common masses of the time. Though the Trinity itself, to this day, has been the most confusing concept of when you go deep into it. And a lot of believers do, and even theologians themselves find themselves like in trouble when it comes to like trying to explain or even analyze the Trinity. The virgin birth, kind of now we discover that the virgin birth could have just meant it was a young age birth, that is. Paulogia did a good video on this with someone who used ancient Hebrew along with the Greek words. I don't know the full details, but like we'll do a future video on that, whether it was a virgin or a misunderstanding. Whether Mary was
If anything, I'll ask Steve Ray to give me Pelagia's contact.
Oh, definitely. I would love to have Pelagia on. And then they have the time of appearance was opportune for Christianity. The Romans were dissatisfied with the old Roman religion and the immorality of the emperors. So the timing was good. The message of the church taught equality for all and love. Debatable, since the equality and love was this display, but rather, at the same time, there was still like a weird supremacist ideology, but it was good window dressing. Then we have the church. It was open for conversion. That was also the good quality it succeeded, including men, women, rich, poor, free, slaves. So it was open to all. It wasn't restricted to, let's just say, if you are descended from this tribe or just this group. It was open to all. So it was not discriminatory when it comes to ethnicity or anything like that. The Christian religion assimilated the Roman culture rather than opposed it. Like at first, it was contrary to it, but then it became sort of assimilated it in a gradual process. So that's why it succeeded, the Christian religion. And now, I know it's not exactly one would say Crusades timeline, but I would say more so. By the way, any final words for this before I move to the so-called? I would call it the conflict with Muslims.
Yeah, I would say that. I would also say that Christianity actually brought a lot of improvement for women and women's rights in the Roman Empire. As strange as this might sound, this is actually the case.
Yeah, especially with conflicts with Muslims. I would actually kind of count this as conflict with Muslims / Islam timeline. Sorry, just got distracted because I wouldn't say it's Crusades per se. Yeah, I will just say / Crusades. Yeah. So the earliest, so the Christian religion did in some ways improve Rome, but in other ways also it's complicated. That is. That's why it was just a good timing that it was accepted so widely. Then we have the life of Muhammad. Basically, this was during the time where we kind of say this as it was during the time of the Byzantines. It was also during the time when Muhammad was preaching, by the way. It was also the time when the Romans and the Sassanid Persians were at war. So it was a very interesting time, which was the birth of Muhammad, because it was seen as a very apocalyptic time, as the biggest empires were in a collision course. Then we have 622 itself, which is Muhammad's migration to Medina from Mecca. This marks the first time that the Muslim calendar starts. The Hijri calendar starts, which is seen as the Muhammad traveling from Mecca to Medina. Even though I would argue it's 634 or 638, around, depending on the historian, Jerusalem was captured when the Caliph Umar defeated the Romans and captured Jerusalem. Now, some say that Muhammad was alive during 634, according to the Doctrina Jacobi. But generally speaking, when strictly considering the Islamic narrative, we'll accept that it was Caliph Umar who was the conqueror of Jerusalem. And he was the second caliph. Abu Bakr was the first one, second was Umar, third was Usman, and the fourth one was Ali. And these are called the Rashidu. One can say fifth is Hassan, but he's more of a transitionary, he's in the transitionary phase because Muawiyah takes over immediately after. So this was the time when Jerusalem was conquered, and was a very easy conquest too. Jerusalem was one of their easiest conquests. Then we have the conquests of Syria and Egypt, which the Muslims conquer. Then in 711, no pun intended there, please don't take this pun. Spain was conquered. Because again, we're having this expansion of the Muslim empires, and there are conflicts with both the Sasanian Persians as well as the Romans, the Christian Romans. And the Christian Romans are being pushed back every step. So with the Muslim conquest, they reach as far as Spain, and they conquered it. Now they're stopped at France in 732, roughly speaking. So at this time, they are, this is the height of the Umayyad Empire. From France all the way to China. That's the height of the Umayyad Empire. I wish I had a map here. And then in 750, the reason it stopped was because, again, the Gauls kind of pushed back, the Vikings. Then you also had, from the east as well, you had the Abbasid revolt too, that started taking place. And it was a very turbulent time. And in the 750, the Abbasids ousted the Umayyads. Interesting story, what happened was when the Abbasids invited the Umayyad clan for dinner, all the male members, they were all murdered on the table. And all being murdered, they proceeded
and
to
the Marwan II fled to Egypt, but was murdered there as well.
So it was his son, Abdurrahman? I forgot his name, who fled to Egypt. I think it was his son who fled to Spain, not Egypt, Spain. And yes, it is impressive. Muslim expansion from a purely militaristic point of view is extremely impressive.
Yes, it is indeed.
It really is impressive, given the short amount of time that they took to spread that to the land. And
one impressive thing is also that it was highly voluntary. I mean, considering that the armies that were made up of volunteers, more or less.
Yep, these were volunteer soldiers. Like most of the commanders, even like people like Khalid bin Walid, Ali bin Abu Talib. You have people like, generals, Hajjaj bin Yusuf. Most people under their command were voluntary. So the campaigns were very impressive.
It should also be noted that we have this view.
As well during this time.
The what?
They were fighting each other during this time as well.
Yeah, the Persians and the Romans. Yes, but one thing that should also be remembered with this voluntary force is that due to the fact that it was voluntary and it wasn't forced recruitment, the soldiers and warriors that were actually fighting here were very well equipped. Because if you're going to, volunteer to do military service, you're going to see to it that you
why
are
do you say that
well
it's
equipped.
voluntary? Why do you say it's voluntary when they were literally forced to? Because jihad is obligatory on every Muslim. There's a Quran verse that it's
not a forced obligatory, and it's actually forbidden to force. It's just that religious demand.
It's more about religious obligation, but I think in terms of militaristic point of view. But from a militaristic, it's not a regular army. It's not a regular army that's forced recruiting. It's more so you have volunteer fighters.
Isn't it true that they are looked down upon if they refuse to go?
I mean, the majority of people, not so much looked down. I mean, the majority of people have not been warriors throughout history. But yeah, I mean, it's more like it's looked up upon to go.
Okay, if you say so. If you say so.
Well, keep in mind, it's more also like it's like from a purely militaristic definition. Again, we're not talking of the religion, purely militaristic. These are more, independent fighters, so to speak. I wouldn't even say voluntary, but more like independent fighters, because these guys were, like Ginny said, more well-equipped compared to their Roman counterparts, who were there was obligatory service.
Yeah, who were actual fighters. Yeah. Now I see your point.
Yeah. So they were more independent, and they were also people, even like Hamza, who was one of the best-known fighters of the time. Even though before the expansion of Islam. How well equipped was this man, and how good of a fighter he was? and you have people, legendary fighters like Amr bin Abdul Wad as well too, who Ali defeated. So
Is
you
Hamza
had
the
these,
one? Is Hamza the one who got killed in the Battle of Uhud, and a
yes,
certain woman chopped his nose off or
yes,
something?
yes,
and
yes,
put it in
yes,
her mouth?
yes. Hamza.
Yeah.
Hamza was
Yeah.
that is Hamza. That's the Hamza I'm talking about. So he's one of
Yeah.
he was like kind of like the standard warrior within Arabia. That was the standard that you were meeting as
Yeah.
the average Arab warrior. So hence why the expansion is very impressive in that sense.
Yeah. And
Um,
also, what about Muhammad bin Qasim who conquered Sindh? He was also
Yes.
about 16 years old, right?
Yeah, it was very young man, extremely young man. He went to the province of Sindh, and was able to expand into Sindh. They weren't
Yeah.
able to go deep into India because I think he was called by Walid, was it, or was it Hajjaj or
Someone
something
called
like
him
that?
back. Yeah, there
Yeah.
was a murder allegation on him, so they called him back.
And then they
And killed
executed him. Yeah, they executed him.
Yeah.
It was
That kind
pretty
of
brutal.
taints his legacy, doesn't it?
Yeah, it taints his legacy, and also because even though I think it was because they saw him as a threat. They saw him as he's sort of like, okay, this guy is winning the favors of the infidel peoples, or like, he's being seen as this hero who's getting rid of the pirates. So they
Yeah.
kind of saw him as the threat to the
And
Umayyad dynasty.
You grew up in a Shia family.
Yes.
Yeah, you grew up in a Shia family, yes?
Yes, yes,
So-
yes.
Was he a hero for you, or was he a villain for
No, well, in the Shia
you?
context,
Muhammad bin
he's seen
Qasim
as a
was a
villain.
hero for you.
He's a villain because he's seen as he's
Yeah.
coming after the descendant of Hassan, like Imam Hassan, or the grandson of Muhammad, Hassan. Like he
Yeah.
was coming after to fight
He
him.
had a certain with one of the family members of Muhammad, he had a beef with them. One of
Yeah,
his descendants,
he
he had a beef.
Yeah, yeah.
So Shias
Now-
don't really like him. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
just something I want to
However, when I questioned this, I kind of found that the timelines don't necessarily add up because this particular descendant lived at a very different time compared to Muhammad bin Qasim. So that was where I also started having my doubts over the Shia doctrine as well. It's like, the timing doesn't add up. And there's not a lot of like independent sources confirming
Yeah,
this
but-
was the reason why the conflict was. Because I see it as it was just purely expansionary. Like how I see the conflict.
Yeah, I mean,
but
I had a childhood friend,
Yeah.
and he's like a Jafari Shia. And one
Yeah,
day
yeah,
I just
yeah.
started mentioning Muhammad bin Qasim. Yeah, he was a great warrior, wasn't he? And I was Muslim at the time. And he turned around to me and said, "Well, yeah, to you he's a great warrior, not for me he isn't." I said, well, what do you mean?
Moose,
He goes,
Yeah,
"I'm a
I
Shia."
want to ask.
So,
Moose,
Yes.
I want to ask. We're edging on the 2 hours, and I know you got shit to do after. So, would you like to do the conflicts next episode and do closings for now, or?
Yeah, let's do. So we're stopping at France, and actually, the Abbasids. Basically, we're stopping here at Abbasids. Let's remember Abbasids for now, and
I
then
could go through the French, how they stopped him, and how
because
how Charles Martel, Charles the Hammer, managed to stop them.
This would definitely go into detail with that next week for sure. Let's go into
Yes.
detail. And though next week is a maybe, but definitely because I turn 29 next week. So
We will be out getting turned like the good coffers we are.
but I'll still do the show. But we'll do like an evening celebration probably. But yeah, thank you guys so much. But anyway, final closing statements. We'll go with Zayn, Sammy from the bloodline first.
I always get to go first, don't I?
Because you're from the Roman Reigns' bloodline, that's why you're gonna get to go first.
Yeah, well, yeah, I feel privileged. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's been an informative episode. And again, I was just listening for the most part, just learning. And if I was able to contribute anything, that's just why I come here. I like being here because it's one of the few places where I can basically cut loose and just talk and say whatever I like. So yeah, it was a pleasure being here.
No worries. And Ginny, a cultured Ginny, your final thoughts.
Well, Roman religion and the development of Christianity is one of those things that are a lot huger than people imagine and actually involves a lot of things outside of Rome as
Yeah.
well. I mean, I added a lot that when we spoke about this as being generally applicable to all Christianity, I actually, mentioned a lot of these exceptions, and also mentioned that Christianity also evolved outside of the Roman Empire. But
Yeah.
the Roman Empire is still, and their type of Christianity that evolved there, is
Yeah.
still the type of Christianity that we most recognize as Christianity in the West, since that's the Christianity that all the Western churches are based on, and even the Protestants own their background to this.
Yeah, no, I definitely. And then we have Nikhil. What are your final thoughts on today's topic?
I hope I didn't bore too many people with this
Are you kidding? This was freaking amazing.
topic.
This
Like with
was
this,
freaking amazing. So the way you organize this, I'm
thank
very
you so much
impressed.
for that.
Yeah, very impressed. Even though we had to skip a lot. Like, apologies for skipping many things because it's so vast. There's just freaking detailed, the history. And this is
So
going
I'll
on
actually discuss this. Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, if because with the Roman stuff, I found my passion for research again, and I'm going in really deep. So if this is kind of a thing where I can summarize some content and we can present it on the show, and if there's other research people like, I can make up a Patreon, still keep it free, and then they can access the Patreon and read through my content if people like.
Yeah. On top of that, you mentioned Patreon. Also, if you ever have a Patreon, we'll post a link for that for sure. I'll also advertise my Patreon. I haven't done, but I'm also switching my Patreon more to mythology. That is, so I do want to do not just Islam because I kind of was like it does get repetitive.
Thank God. I thought you're. Thank God. I thought you're like I'm migrating it to OnlyFans, and I was like, ah, shit.
No. I'm not migrating it to OnlyFans. No, I could technically do an OnlyFans. It's just it'll have to be purely like mythology. That is.
No.
So well, Ginny will be like sexy mythology.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea. It would work for sapiosexuals.
Yeah. Sapiosexuals would definitely be turned on by that. So
that's the thing,
Yeah.
I will require some brain bleach.
All right. But yeah, Drastic Measures is looking forward to the chapter on Salahuddin. It's been a while since he showed up on the Gin and Tonic, so we're definitely going to cover Salahuddin. And we're definitely going to go into the details of France. What the hell happened in France? As Ginny would love to talk about that next week. So thank you all for coming. And it was a brilliant show. I won't be at Discord, but you have the option to go to Discord as I will start getting ready to leave. But thank you guys so much. It's been a pleasure, and have a nice day.
It has been fun.
Yeah.
Take care, guys.